So welcome to another of my midweek conversations. This morning I'm chatting with Claire Woodward, who's been in the life of Emmanuel for about 2 or 3 years now, and whose hair's growing longer and longer and longer in lockdown. But it's still great colour, even though there's a bit of grey as well.
Grey and white, unfortunately.
Welcome, Claire. Tell us a little bit about yourself, just to introduce who you are, because you're on the leadership team, but not everybody at Emmanuel will know you.
I'm Claire. I'm born and bred from Sheffield. Lived there for many years. Moved over the border, over to the dark side to Barnsley, about 7 or 8 years ago now, into Hoyland. So I'm only just in Barnsley. Basically, that was around us moving, so we wasn't too far away from friends that lived in Sheffield as well. Live here with my husband Andrew, who I've been married to for 8 years this year, and been together for a good few, many more than that. So about 15 or 16 years we've been together. So just a few.
And tell us a little bit about what you do in terms of your work.
So work-wise, I'm in marketing, so I head up a business development team at a housing charity based over in Lincolnshire, in Gainsborough, in Lincolnshire. So sounds a long way away to people that only travel local for work, but it's nearer than where I was before, which was in Northampton, and that's nearer again than where I was before that, which was London. So I'm getting nearer and nearer home as the years go by. But we also have offices in Sheffield as well. So I head up marketing, communications, and also I'm responsible for growing the organisation with the business development side of the team.
Cool, that's great. And tell me about how lockdown has been for you. I guess there have been ups and downs, like lots of people. How are you reflecting on that, on the joys and the difficulties?
So it's an interesting one, this one, because I've been watching, obviously, the midweek conversations from people so far, with Alan talking about his allotment and all those sorts of things that people have been able to get on and do. For me, it's literally been relentlessly busy. I've ended up, obviously, in my role in the housing charity, we are classed as key workers. So we've been responsible for ensuring all 7,000 of our customers, majority of which are vulnerable customers, ensuring that they've been okay throughout this crisis. So even probably pre-lockdown, we was moved into a kind of crisis team, and I head up that crisis team. So I'm at the moment responsible for our business continuity. So I'm heading up the team that's meeting every day to make sure reacting to whatever's happened over the last 24 hours and what needs to happen in planning to mobilise and to get back to normal, or whatever normal means. So it's been really busy. I think obviously we've not been in the office since lockdown began on the 23rd of March. So we moved home and we've been working from home. I'm lucky I've got an office at home, which I'm sat in today. So I've been able to lock myself away at home, but it's been 10, 11, 12-hour days, which is probably, those of you that know me, it's not much different to when I'm not in the office, when I'm not in lockdown, because I'm somewhat of a workaholic, to say the least. But I love work. I think that's the main thing. I do love work, and I put my 110% into it. So it's been interesting. I think lockdown wise, it's just been really interesting, I think, because whilst we've got the camp of people that obviously have been able to get on and do some stuff that they've not been able to do before because they've been given that time. I know a few of my friends have been in that kind of camp. There's a good chunk of us that are in the camp of it's just no different. It's just we're working at home and we've got 2 earphones like I have now glued to our ears 12 hours a day. So I think it's been quite interesting. My husband wasn't working at the beginning of this process because he does interim work. So he was at home bored to tears. So he's had a project on. So he's been building a new bar shed in the garden, which is humongous, I think is the best way. But it does look very good. It's now 98% finished as of this week. So that's been our project during lockdown, to say the least. So again, for those of us that know us, I've already got a bar in our house, in our garage. So we've now got 2 bars. Not who needs 2 bars? Who knows? But apparently we do. So difficulty-wise, though, it's been really hard not seeing people. I think at the beginning it was okay doing Zooms like this one, but actually I'm an extrovert, and I think I've become a bit of an introvert hermit, which has been really challenging to a certain degree. And it's been really hard being such a person that is a social person, that actually not talking to people. And I actually was able to go on a walk on the weekend just gone, and actually that was just so lovely. Just getting back out of hibernation is what I'm calling it at the moment.
I think introvert hermit wouldn't be a label I would give you naturally, Claire. So
it feels like it though.
Yeah, I really hope that your extrovert character can blossom again now that maybe we're allowed a bit more social distancing. I think that reflection of two camps of people is very pertinent, really. You know, those people who've been on furlough, who've been able to do lots of things, and those people who've been just cracking on with normal work, as it were, perhaps in a different way, but it's been as busy as ever, and I relate quite a bit to that, really. What's helped you in your faith in this time of lockdown, particularly?
I think going into lockdown, obviously being part of the leadership team, we've obviously been starting those conversations about how to engage more broadly across the different groups. Obviously, for those of you that know me from within Emmanuel, I've got a real passion for the young people and children's work. That's obviously I'm helping out with Roots, and we've been looking at how we reach more people. And I think it's been challenging because obviously numbers drop. You start to see that, you start to see how we can connect things, and then lockdown happens, and then it was kind of all got put onto a grinding halt. I think being able to continue connecting into people through the service, through we've had root sessions, that's been great, and actually just being able to connect with people across the Emmanuel family. One thing that's been really good for me with regards to connecting with people, we've had a coffee chat every week with a group of us across Emmanuel, that Alison kindly set up, and that's been really, really good because it's people all within the same kind of mindset, all working still, all kind of being able to kind of share openly and honestly about where we're at, and both faith and non-faith kind of challenges, and that's been really, really powerful for me. And I think from a Sunday point of view, offering to do the Facebook services was just a kind of, let's just try it week 1, and then we're now on week 14, which I don't think any of us appreciated it would be going on for so long. But actually, I think I felt as though God was asking me to do that, and actually that was me using my skills that I had to try something, and that for me has really been a powerful thing, to be able to feel more connected to the Emmanuel family, but also more connected to God as well.
Certainly know from our listeners and people who are connecting through Emmanuel family that service has been really well appreciated. We're always tweaking it. We're not in a rut because we're doing Zoom this week, I believe, through the circuit. So that's a changing feast, as it were, and that's great. That's part of maybe the adaptability and flexibility of lockdown. Sometimes in our life as well, it's a bit like that. You know, we come and go. Faith goes up and then it goes down. Tell me a little bit about that journey for you in terms of faith. Have you always believed? Have you always gone to church, or is this something you come to later?
So yeah, I think I've always gone to church. My mum took us to the local church. Took us. I don't know who else is. It's only me and my mum because I'm an only child. But took me to the local church at Trinity Furvale Methodist, just quite around the corner from the Northern General Hospital in Sheffield, where we lived in Furvale when I was younger. Mum got heavily involved in the church then and started running the toddler group with what was then the minister's wife, and who became one of her best friends, and we became family friends as well. So I've always been involved in church. I grew up through Sunday school, grew up through Girls Brigade. So Girls Brigade is a massive part of my life. I run a local group over in Sheffield still, and involved regionally, locally, and nationally. I'm part of the trustee team nationally as well of Girls Brigade, and I think that has been probably one of the biggest parts of my faith journey. I think, like most teenagers, you get to that age where you sway and you've kind of been going because your mum's been telling you to go or taking you to go on a Sunday morning or on a Tuesday night at Girls Brigade, and you do that thing of do you choose. So at Girls Brigade wise, my mum encouraged me to start helping. I did the leaders there at Girls Brigade, so I started helping with some of the younger groups, and that kind of kept me there through my teenage years. And then I went off to uni, so I kind of saw that as my real break in kind of this journey, as probably most people do. I had a year away, probably realistically, came back every so often, still went to camp with Girls Brigade in the summer, but not much other connection really to church. But then, interestingly, I used to work at Dulcie's shoe shop, and I transferred backwards and forwards between Sheffield and Nottingham, where I went to university. And it turned out that there was a girl there who was one of the Saturday team that actually went to Girls Brigade. So I went to Girls Brigade in Nottingham and went to church. Her family grew up through the church and were very active in Nuttall Methodist Church in Nottingham. So it was one of those where it's like, pass the crossing again. Like I say, it was one of those signs, and ignored it a little bit because obviously I'd got the uni life, I was living away from home, I'd got work down there, so I was quite busy, but it just kept coming back to that for whatever reason. And I started going to Nuttall Methodist Church on a Sunday evening because I had an evening service, so that fitted really well, and started going to Girls Brigade there, so became a leader in Girls Brigade while I was there, and that really kind of cemented my kind of faith, really. So whilst I've always believed and always gone to church, I think that was the real years where it really made me challenge myself as to whether this is kind of the life that I want, and to really accept God fully and totally. So that kind of happened. I never thought I'd come back to Sheffield. I always thought I'd stay in Nottingham. That was kind of my plan. I stayed there over the summers, came home for Christmas in my the third year, and met Andrew. So plans completely changed. So we ended up moving home. My mum moved in with her now husband. I moved into our house that we rented, and the idea being that I'd stay there for 6 months, sort out where I was going to go and what was going to happen. And here I am now. So I ended up staying here and going back into a Girls Brigade company locally. Obviously joined back into my company that was at Furvale before the church closed, and then moved across the road to the Anglican Church, to St Cuthbert's near Northern General. So that's really been my journey. I think God's always been there all the way through, but just like most people, it's an up and down. You kind of try and ignore it, but then it always comes back more powerfully to a certain degree.
And I think what you've said is partly about belief is connected with belonging. So Girls Brigade, that vicar's family, that sense of being part of something, a group, a family, a church, is quite foundational, it seems to me, as I listen to your story, for your belief. Belonging and belief go together.
Yeah.
And maybe living out that faith for you is quite, as a practical person, is also quite an important thing for you.
Absolutely.
And when the things go all pear-shaped and you've had a really tough time, what have been the things that have sustained you, kept you on track?
I think that analogy that you said there around that belonging and family, I think somebody always knows. So it might not be God speaking to me directly, and I think that isn't the way I see that faith. It is the way that it's lived out through others. There's always somebody that realizes and picks it up, picks up that phone, sends that message, regardless. It doesn't have to be anything big or major. And actually, it's through some people that aren't faith-based and that aren't part of my church family as well. But I still believe that's God working through others. To pick me up. I am a positive person. It takes a lot to get me down, but I think when that does happen, there is always something that happens to get me straight back to where I need to be, and that is what that when it's challenging, that is what it is really for me. I think one of the most powerful things was when my church closed in Furvale 3 years ago now. I was part of the group that ultimately closed the church, which is really sad when you look back, but actually we were determined to go out on our own merits, determined to go out on a high rather than close it because we have to, or because there was nobody left to do that. And I think that was what we didn't want to happen to something that was so vibrant and big in that community. But the first few weeks afterwards, I kind of saw it as can I have a break? Don't have to get up on a Sunday morning. Don't have to go and find anywhere straight away. It's up to me when I do that. And my husband, who doesn't go to church but respects obviously everything that I do, really pushed me and said, Claire, a few weeks in, you need to go and find a church. You need to go to church on a Sunday morning. He says, you can see you're going through that grieving process a little bit, really, and it's really getting you down, and you need that connection with those people, which was what started my journey of going on a tour across some of the places around both Sheffield and Barnsley circuits to find my new home.
And we're really pleased that you made home at Emmanuel, which is great. And I think it's really important that, we do realise that God doesn't just send Christians to support us when maybe we need an encouragement, but actually God can use anybody to to motivate us, to encourage us, to keep us focused, to keep us on his track. So thinking about those people, maybe, and I guess there's lots of people that, at work, in your social group, who are not Christians. If somebody said to you, hey, Claire, just in a minute, tell me the crux of your faith, what it is about this Christian lark, what is your belief, what is the heart, the nub of it, what would you say to them?
I think I had that conversation quite a lot, particularly at this work where I am now, because in my previous role, I was at a Christian charity, where it was Christian young person charity, Spurgeon's, for those of you that might know them, and obviously that was where you was very active in your faith. You was able to talk quite open and honestly. There was a lot of evangelical Christians around me that actually challenged my faith as well at the time, but then moving back into kind of a commercial world where it wasn't as appropriate in some ways to just talk open and honestly. But actually what I've challenged myself with is talking about it when people have asked, and actually I've been really open and honest, particularly at ACES where I am now, and with friends, and they ask questions. And I think for me, if I was to, I'm just honest about it. I think that's the real crux of it for me. The word you used earlier is what I would describe it. It is my family. I think I come from a very small family, and whilst they're my born and bred family, my church family is my family, and I know I talked about that very much at Trinity are my family still, where I was, they still will be. We're still checking on each other, but Emmanuel are my family too, and that's the way I would describe it. It's that constant, it's that there's the control there, and it's the fact that ultimately when things do get tough, or you get challenged with questions, whether it be work or whether it be home or whatever the situation is, that actually you get to a point where you just accept it and you give it up to God and you wait to find out what happens, and actually that knowing that is there, that I can trust in something so much bigger than me. That's what I believe is what's so important and what's so valuable, particularly for those that are non-Christians that don't really understand it enough. That's the bit that they seem to really understand when I describe it in that way.
Cool. And just reflecting on Fairvale and that difficult, traumatic sort of grieving process of closing a church, though it sounds like it was a really positive thing as well, an optimistic thing. Are there things that you miss about Fairvale from, your previous church that maybe we as a church could not replicate, but, reflect on?
I think there's two things really that when I think back, apart from the obvious of missing the people, I think, but we've got other ways of making sure we connect in and we share those stories with each other, not as obviously frequently and regularly. I miss knowing everyone's names, because that's the biggest, I suppose, culture shock for me coming to Emmanuel, which was what drove me in some ways to stay here, because it was so much bigger, and actually there was the real opportunity there that I saw. But actually looking at people, people knowing my name and then me not knowing theirs, because I'm terrible with names anyway, I found really hard. And actually there was only 20 or so of us at Trinity, so it was easy. Know each other. I'd been 20 odd 30 odd years, so it's easier, but so that's, I do miss that, being able to just put face to name and kind of their story and their situation, but that comes with time at the end of the day. The bit that I miss the most from Trinity is the children's work. We had a Sunday school that on the day we closed was still bigger than the congregation for Trinity. It was one of the biggest in the circuit at the time, and I miss that. I miss the kind of the multi-generational piece, that we were so heavily involved in services, that the Sunday school wasn't just Sunday school away from everything else. It was so connected into everything. Probably helped that we who ran Sunday school, ran Girls Brigade, were on the church council, got the flowers out in the morning, and ran the toddler group. So the reality is that comes with a smaller church, doesn't it? But the fact that we had such a strong Sunday school that had loads of teenage boys as well, particularly, but also had a mix of different backgrounds. So we had people that obviously came in walking off the street. We had our Karen community that worshipped with us, and they were heavily involved in the Sunday school side as well. I think that side of it, I really miss the size, the scale that actually comes with what you can do with that group of people, which is why I've put so much energy into Roots with Christine and Chris and Rachel and Andrea and everybody as well.
And that's clearly one of our hopes and dreams really for working in terms of Emmanuel, to look at that and to perhaps revamp our Sunday work and to be more embracing in terms of reaching out to new families and to new children, and maybe to help you, maybe when we come back from lockdown, maybe we should wear name badges for a few weeks, just to supporting that sort of, because I guess that's not just your issue. I guess a lot of people find that as well. I know the person by sight, but not by name, and that's one of the drawbacks of a bigger church. Finally, what are your hopes for the future, personally and church-wise?
So church-wise, I think you've just hit the nail on the head with regards to the Sunday worship. I think my real hope is that we manage to join everything together and we can link that with the wider work that obviously Kirsty and Dawn are leading on, and we can really kind of be known for that as a church, that we reach out and we enable people to follow on their path towards God and make that commitment. That's my real hope from a children and young people's point of view. I think more generally for the church, I think it's the fact of being able to in the short to medium term meet again. I think that's the reality. That's what we're all working towards in some ways, to be able to see people face to face in a way that we can worship. And I've talked about it on the leadership team calls, to have one big party, because actually that's what we do well in a church. We can put on a good spread. That's what I always remember for any church event. And I think the day we can do that and we can bring everybody together and be that community again, that's what I think we'll know we've come back out the other side of this from that point of view. Personally, I would really look forward to in the short to medium term that I can go on my holiday that I've not been able to go on. So unfortunately, it was my husband's 40th during lockdown. We celebrated at home, sat on our own, which is very bizarre for us. But we were due to go to America and do an amazing trip across different places for 3 weeks, and unfortunately we should have been flying back today and we've not been able to. So that's the real short-term goal for me, that we can go back on that amazing holiday that we'd originally planned. Because again, people that know me, I don't plan things like that, so the fact we planned it is just slightly frustrating, to say the least. But that's the real side. But that's what I'm hoping for in the short-term future.
Thank you very much, Claire. Great to chat to you. A lot of echoes of my own hopes and dreams. I think we do want to get to that point where we meet again. Leadership team are planning and preparing for that, but we obviously need to wait for permissions, both from national.
I'm very impatient, as you know.
I know, and from government as well. And we all are, but I always tend to. I'm a bit of an optimist as well, so I think I always feel, well, that's another day through, which means a day nearer to that happening again. So hopefully that will happen sooner rather than later. But thank you for being in conversation with me, and I know you've got a really, really busy day, so I hope God is with you this day as he is every day, and that he'll use you wherever you are. Thank you very much for sharing with me this morning.
No problem.